Hello, my friends. This is Dr. Am supporting your journey with principles of economics. We are going to continue our long run and short run macroeconomic discussion. By this time, we are ready to bring in inflation and unemployment along what was introduced to you with the previous presentation as it was related to a long run model where long-run aggregate supply was determined by the taste, preferences, technology, and population, and aggregate demand, if you recall, was determined by the stock of money, money supply, and money demanded, along with desired cash balance ratio. So basically what we have done previously, we looked at comparative static. We looked at what happens when central bank or the Federal Reserve starts to print more money, and that works historically the same across different countries and throughout the history. And what happens when the cash balance ratio is changing as well. So as you see, the aggregate demand is either going up or down, and thus it will trigger inflationary process or deflationary process, and it will impact the bond prices and stock prices, consumption increase or decrease. So all of that was presented to you in the previous video presentation. So today we are going to look into some other items that are important to consider, and that is the short run model. So in the short run model, supply is perfectly unchanging in relationship to price, because think about fast food restaurant. Fast food restaurant is experiencing increase in demand for food during the lunchtime, but during some other times it's fairly lessened or damped the demand. And what you see on the slide, it reflects that. So they still supply the same amount of food at the same price. You see the prices don't change on the graph, but the demand does. If you were to consider lunchtime from 11 o'clock in the morning to 1 p.m., the demand goes up, but the supply does not change. It stays the same. Neither do the fast food restaurants employ more people to serve during the lunchtime. So I want you to appreciate the fact that the short run and the long run decisions are very critical, as for a macroeconomic level as well as for microeconomic level as well. Now let's go to discuss as to price variation and why restaurants do not regulate according to demand when it comes to changing prices. For example, according to the first law of demand, as price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. And when you anticipate in so predictable fashion that during the lunchtime the demand will go up and you'll have a flood of customers coming during the lunchtime, you might as well raise the prices in order to capitalize on heightened demand, as it's been done very consistently across the entire market conditions. For example, when the firm sees that the demand for their product goes up, they are in a good position to raise the price. And that would probably cut on some lines that you see through the drive-through window, or lines to be seated during the dinner time when you go to the restaurant. So why price variation does not take place? Well, number one, if customers know that companies will take advantage in the short run by raising the prices, it will induce the cost on the customer to search for a better deal. So it becomes costly to go to that fast food restaurant when customer does not know and what to anticipate in terms of prices. So typically when people go out to those fast food restaurants or some other places, they anticipate certain level of prices to encounter. And if the restaurant is going to be capitalizing on increase in demand in the short run by charging higher prices, then it will make the entire experience more costly for customers, and eventually it will drive customers away. So that would be one reason why prices don't change in the short run under those circumstances. The second reason is to change the price and to stick to the mean cost. It is also costly. So because once you change the prices, it involves some process, some processing information, publication of those prices, and it's not that simple to change prices during the lunchtime from day to day based on the demand. So it does raise some cost on suppliers. And among other things, I will give you another reason: reputational effects. Reputation is a real value-added asset for any firm. And if the firm is going to be known by taking advantage of customers, then it may suffer some reputational effects. And because reputation gives predictability and establishing trust, that fact alone would allow company to charge a premium. So the company with reputation is always in a better position to charge higher prices than the one without reputation. So, and therefore reputation is a real economic asset and should be guarded as such. And when companies are revealing themselves that they are taking advantage of the customers at an opportune time, it may impact reputation, and certainly companies want to resist that phenomenon. Now, those decisions, when it comes to long run and the short run, introducing inventory problem, because at some point in time you have too much stuff, and when you have too much stuff, you tend to be willing to cut the prices. And when you have relatively less stuff, then you tend to raise the prices. And essentially that's what banks do when they try to restructure their portfolios. So when you go to different banks and you get a quote in terms of the interest rate for a loan, let's say car loan or a mortgage, you are likely to find different interest rates across different banks, in part because they are adjusting to their own portfolio / inventory. They look at what their customer base is, and in terms of deposits and withdrawals, and they determine that's what determines in part the size, magnitude, and direction of the change of the interest rates. So it's not just solely what happens at the marketplace when the central bank is changing the interest rate, even though it does impact what banks are going to offer in terms of their own interest rates, but they have their own microclimate in economic terms conditions whether they adjust to. And thus it's not surprising to see quite a few of variations in prices when it comes to intertemporal choices reflected in terms of the interest rate. So you will find interest rates to vary from bank to bank. And when it comes to certificate of deposits, when it comes to the savings rate, mortgage rates, and such. The other reason is for short run and long run decisions that can intrude is government regulations. For instance, let's say you have an emergency, maybe a funeral to attend, and you need to buy the airline ticket. The law can prevent the airline company to sell you ticket at the last minute for $25,000 because you are stuck with this constraint in a condition where you must fly to attend the funeral of a loved one, and you are a customer that appears on at the marketplace at the last minute. So regulations do matter, and they do intrude into those decisions. You can think about the airline example where you are likely to find that all the passengers on the plane pay different prices for their airline tickets, and in part it was driven by the date when they acquired the tickets. Typically, airlines do not like to sell tickets at the last minute. They want to have their own predictability in terms of collecting the revenues, and because of that they are willing to sell for less expensive the further out you buy your tickets. And as you move closer, let's say less than 2 weeks before your flight, your tickets are likely to go up in price, in part because airlines try to regulate the seating capacity, which is the inventory for them. So if the selling of the tickets goes too fast, then the airlines tend to raise the price, and they are well in the position to do so. That's how they adjust to their inventory. They have a very sophisticated computer algorithms that tracking the prices, not just for their own fleet of airplanes, but also for competitors as well. And if tickets are selling too slow, they want to adjust the inventory by lowering the prices, and that happens all the time. So now let's go to the next slide, where we are going to put together the long run and the short run in terms of macroeconomic level. So impact period, that's important to consider whenever you do comparative static. Is it measured in terms of hours, days, weeks? And that will determine whether you are on the micro level or you are staying on the macro level. Now, we have already mentioned that no one wants to change prices and experience impact during the time when there is a short run changes, like fast food restaurants. They don't change prices during the lunchtime. At the same time, nobody wants to work on the weekend, so demand goes down, but prices do not change. So during McDonald's or Burger King or some other fast food chain restaurants, and that's what you will see happens all the time. Now let's go to slow motion change, where the short run is becoming a part of the long run. So you are moving from point A to point B, and that would constitute the short-run aggregate supply. And it will allow you to see how aggregate demand, when it goes up, it doesn't just jump from A to C. It goes through some intermediate changes or some transitional periods, and that impacts the unemployment. In particular, unemployment rate goes down because to produce more output according to the move from A to B is requiring more people to make it happen. So you are likely to see that cyclical unemployment is going to decrease when you're moving from A to B. And then the input prices or the cost, because you engage more labor, is likely to increase, and thus short-run aggregate supply will go back to its original level of the output, and that's where you're moving from B to C. Or we can say this is a steady state equilibrium. Now, similar dynamic is taking place when the aggregate demand goes down and shifts to the left. So you are now moving from, you're not jumping all of a sudden from A to C, but rather once the ceteris paribus conditions change, we are looking at moving from A to B, and cyclical unemployment is likely to go up because to produce less output in terms of quantity or GDP, you need less labor, and thus there are some layoffs that are taking place, and actually has been recorded in 2020 with a pandemic of coronavirus. So now you see how unemployment is becoming a part of this macroeconomic conditions, and that brings you to a fuller picture of different variables taking different values because of various impacts that is taking place. And that is what is referred to comparative static. On this note, I would like to finish this presentation and wish you a very healthy day.